Good evening. Good morning. Thank you very much for coming. Tonight we're going to hear three fascinating, hopefully different. We have no idea. We haven't spoken to each other. So it could be three times the same thing or three different talks on Tefila. What exactly we're going to hear, you'll have to stay awake to find out. 20-minute slots, and then we get to stretch our legs, go to the sukkah, there's some food, and then we come back, another 20 minutes, and then at the end, if you want to stay a bit longer, feel free to stay. Without any further nonsense from me, Rabbi Chazan. He knows who he is, we know who he is, so he doesn't need an introduction. Now, where have you heard that one before?
Yesterday in Shul, I noticed the guest speaker told a story at the end of the sermon, and I was looking for facial expressions, body language, and no one got up to dance. It was incredible, and one of my favorite stories, an amazing story, which I don't think the Olam really appreciated the depth and profundity of what he was saying. Let me just repeat briefly the story of the Chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek, who Erev Yom Kippur finds out there's a Jew in the shtetl who suddenly was arrested and placed in a dungeon of despair by the Poritz, the rich aristocrat, the nobleman he owed money to. And the Jew, this Chassid, was the Hoibin of Chassid, he was a Talmid Chacham and a very special person. He couldn't bear the thought that Yom Kippur, Yom HaKadosh, a Jew will languish in this dungeon, and immediately he stopped what he was doing. His achon is his preparation for Yom Kippur. He went to collect money to get the poor shtetl. People didn't have the money, and suddenly he was not successful. He suddenly remembered that in the pub on the edge of town there's a bum, a scoundrel, a rogue, a lout, mamish, a lowlife, who hangs out a whole day Erev Yom Kippur in the pub with the goyim, with the shkotzim, with the lowest of low. But this guy is a very wealthy guy. He goes to him, maybe he could tug on his heartstrings, Erev Yom Kippur. Goes to him, tells him the story. The guy decides to have a joke at this guy's expense. He says, if you drink 2 bottles of vodka, I'll give you the money. So this poor chassid, he doesn't have much of a choice. He downs 3 bottles of vodka, gets the geld, runs to the Poritz's palatial mansion, redeems the Jew from his dungeon. By the time it comes to Kol Nidus, puts on his Yontif Tika garb, his kittel, he's stoned out of his mind. He's shtoit, mamish shikr viloit. He's out of his mind. So Kol Nidre opens with the opening of the ark, but this guy's a bit like in his cups. And when the ark is opened, he starts singing in the nigun of Simchas Torah, Atorah Yisrael Adas, Ki Hashem Olikim, Einoid Mulvadoi. And he's pasha humiliating, he's embarrassing. This Yid, this chassid, he's humiliating himself in front of everyone in the shul. They all think he's out of his mind, right? And he's dancing, singing. And after Yontif, he felt whatever. So he went to the Tzemach Tzedek to ask for a tikkun. Tzemach Tzedek heard the story, he was so happy. He says, normally you have to go through a whole process to come to the zenith, to the mountaintop, the Atar Yisrael Adas, which is the purpose all the avodah of Elul and Slichas and Rosh Hoshana and Asher B'Tshuva, Yom Kippur, he went straight to Atar Yisrael Adas. What does the story mean? It's a deep, deep story. There's a word from Rabbi Yitzchak ben Sarah Sashas, Chusi Yagen Aleinu, the Holy Barditchev and Kedushas Levi, Ein Yom Kippurim Miskaper Achi Yikones Lebechinas Ayin. Yom Kippur is not effective to purify a person. That a person should have atonement, or as I always say, at-one-ment with the Eibishter, until you reach the madreg of ayin, total self-effacement and bittul and humility. That's what the name of the game is. I mean, if anything we learned from the past year and all the terrible, terrible sorrows that both individuals and the klal has gone through, there's a famous story, the famous song, it's popularized by my dear friend Avram Fried. It's actually based on the words of Rameir Halevi, the Erl Shamayim of Apt. And it goes, Yadati, I know, Ki hineni biyodcha kachimir biyadi oita. Eibishter, I'm in your hands like a piece of pottery in the hands of the potter, the former, right? V'gamim es ameitz be'etzis v'sach bulois. Even if I have the greatest, the most cunning, the most shrewd, the most brilliant schemes and dreis, right? Everyone is standing to give me eitzis and to help me out in my matziv. Without Eibishter, without your help, without your uzcha v'ezrecha, without your assistance, then we have no eights of Yeshua. There's no salvation without the Eibishter's help. In other words, you could have an MBA from Oxford, from Harvard, and Yale. You could be incredibly cunning. You have all these strategies and business plans, et cetera, and all these dreams and aspirations. Without the Eibishter's help, segornish, nothing happens. One little germ you can't see. You can only see it in a laboratory, perhaps, and could destroy all of your dreams and hopes and aspirations. Your whole life, you go from the mountaintop into Shel Tachtis, into Bira Amikta. Suddenly, in no time. As I've said countless times, David HaMelech, whose Ushpiz is tonight, he's the guest on Hoshana Raba. He says, Ad onna Hashem taster espanecha mimeni. How long, Hashem, will you hide your countenance, your goodness, your benevolence from us? Said the Rizhiner, David HaMelech continues, Ad onna oshis eitus benafshi. As long as you have eitus and tachbulis, you have strategies and cunning and you have mind, right? Then the Eibishter says, Fadreizach dein Kop, DIY job, do it yourself, lass mir reis Geschäft, leave me alone. When a person realizes his vulnerability, his fragility, that all of us, everything about us, Baruch Niyas Begashmius, is in the hands of the Eibishter, and we stand before him as a Kli Molebusha, Klima full of humility and self-effacement, then the Eibishter suddenly kicks in. And this is true the whole year. How much more so? Basically, it's Sforim HaKadoshim say, Chag HaSukkos, Bnei Yissaschar, it's called Chag HaOsif, the festival of the ingatherings. Ingathering of what? Not only of your fruit, of your grain, of your vegetables. It's a Chag HaOsif of all the tefillas, the whole year, which we davened, but our heart was not with us. We didn't daven properly. On these days of Sukkot, one is Chag HaOsif, one gathers in, one elevates retroactively all of the tefillas. Therefore, it says in Parashat Mishpatim, the Chag HaOsif b'tzeis Hoshana, at the end of the year, the ingathering, ba'osfras masa yodecha. It doesn't say tfu oscha, it doesn't say your grain, your produce. Masa yodecha, the Satmar Rebbe says in Divrei Yoel, refers to our tefillas that we achieve. Now we have the ingathering. And therefore, says the Chaim Sofer, that's one of the reasons why Sukkot is called Zman Simchoseinu, a time of joy and happiness, because a Yid has bitochen in the power of tefillah generally over the 7 days of the Yontif of Sukkot. And therefore we know each one of the three pilgrimage festivals, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, corresponds to one of the patriarchs. Pesach is Avram, Shavuos is Yitzchak, Yankov is Sukkot, right? What do we know about Yaakov? He was granted by the Eibishter, Ufaratzta, Chazal say, Anachala B'li Mitzorim, a inheritance without limitation, without boundaries. And everyone knows, as Sforim HaKadoshim say, Nachal B'li Mitzorim is Gimatria 515, Gimatria Tefila. Yaakov personifies Tefila. The idea of a sukkah generally is called a base Tefila, a house of prayer. The first time you ever see mentioned a sukkah, Chazal say when the Eibishter created the world, on day one, he made a sukkah in Yerushalayim, Vayhi b'sholem sukkah, and there he davened, Yirotzin she'era b'binyan beisi. I should be zoicha, I should be merit to see the building of my temple, of my home. Where did God daven? Where's the place of davening? A sukkah. So already from time immemorial, the idea of a sukkah is connected to, it's called the Beit Tefillah. And if you don't believe me, the words v'lakachtem lechem b'yem harishan is b'gimatria lishmoya el arina vel tefillah, that God hearkens, He listens to our prayers on this day. We say sit in the sukkah, l'man yedu deresechem, l'man yedu deresechem is gimatria 960, which is gimatria shari shamayim, the gates of heaven which are opened on Sukkot to receive our tefillahs. Why Dafka? What is the message here? Everyone knows there's a famous Shachal HaTorah, rabbis and drushes always use it, who says the four species we have in Dalminin, we have in Sukkot, the lulav, the esrog, the adasim, and arovis, represent four essential parts of the body. The lulav is the shedra, the spine, the esrog is the heart, the adasim are the eyes, and the arovis are the lips. So the Shamloya Rov in the Sefer Even Shleima points out in Tehillim of David HaMelech, People have the custom, by the way, on the night of Hoshana Raba to say start and finish the entire Sefer Tehillim. Just pointing out. If you look through Tehillim, you will find that dafka these 4 parts of the body are connected to gaiva, to arrogance, to conceit. You have an ayin gavoya, a eye which looks upwards, a man who thinks of himself a cut above the rest. You have altveni regel gaiva, the feet of gaiva, which the feet walking, we learn in Hilchos Treifas, is connected to the spine. You have the heart, which is a heart full of gaiva, the ruach gavoya, the spirit, which is spirit, the ruach is in the heart. The opposite of leiv, nishbar, v'nitra, a broken heart, a contrite heart, in the classical formulation of Aaron Agadol of Karlin, famous quotation, there is nothing as wholesome as a broken Jewish heart, right? And the mouth, lashon medaberes gedolos, vaseinu itanu mi'odin loinu, a person who thinks he runs the world, he has a good sharp tongue, he'll talk his way out of every situation, and that's lips of gaiva. And the purpose is to take all of these 4 parts of the body, essential parts, and to turn them into something which is symbol of self-effacement and humility, which is the reason there is a famous question. In the normal order of things, every morning of Sukkot, you have a mitzvah to daven, shachris, you have a mitzvah to take the 4 species. Which comes first? Which should come first? As I always say, optimally, if you have the time, you didn't fall out of bed and roll into shul, really you should take your daled minim, go into the sukkah, and bench daled minim in the sukkah first, and then you go and daven. Shtel sich the shayla, which all the commentaries deal with at great length, the general halachic principle is, the axiom is, tadir v'she'enei tadir kodim. What takes precedence? What comes first? That which is more frequent. You daven every day of the year, Shachris. Daled Minim is only 7 days a year. So really you should first daven Shachris and then take the Daled Minim. And the simple answer is, because since these Daled Minim are a symbol of humility, and all of Tefila is an acknowledgement of our fragility and our vulnerability and our achno before the Eibishter, as Chazal say, one davens through kovid which Rashi translates, achno, bittul, shiflus, humility and self-effacement. Therefore, the preparation for davening is dafka taking these daled minim, which symbolize all of the above. And therefore it says, I said, Leman Yedu Deresechem 960, which is Gematria Shara Shemayim, it opens the gates of heaven. I'll have you know how many lugim are there in a mikveh, which purifies? 900, very good. You get in there. After a while, a few more years, you'll get to know how to answer my questions without even thinking. All right? There is nothing as purifying in life as humility. There's a famous story told of Naftali of Ropshitz, the holy Ropshitzer, who was gathered with a group of people, and they saw a younger man going to mikveh in the morning, preparation for davening. And he went with great kavonis, and he's like, in his mind, you can see him working over what should he thinks when he immerses himself. And then he goes to the mikveh and he's coming back, and the Ropshitzer turned and he said, this younger man, he went to the mikveh so holy and so pure, and he came back from the mikveh so full of aveiros. Because what happened? He went to mikveh, he's been a person, and he became arrogant through going to the mikveh. And as the Tzemach Dovid, or Dovel of Din, of the son of Nezal says, there's no greater chatzitzo, there's no greater interposition which separates between a person and the waters, which prevent the person from receiving purity, than gaiva, than arrogance and conceit. And not only does the gaiva separate between you and God and the waters of purity, it separates between one Jew and another Jew. Therefore, 960 is also Begimatria, Achtus Yisrael. When a person has humility, right, everyone doesn't think the world was created for me and I'm the center of the world, then you're able to come to have an Achtus of Klal Yisrael, a unity of Klal Yisrael, and then you come to Simcha, as David HaMelech, again, David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Tagelna Achts Meitztichiso. You bring joy to the bones that you have purified. Purity, joy comes when a person is purified. Das to say the taris, which is the idea of sukkah. How many days do you sit in the sukkah? 7, whatever. I'm talking about Chutzlaris, but where the homeland for Torah is Eretz Yisrael. 7 times sukkah is gimatria, ofar va'efer, dust and ashes, the ultimate symbol of purity, and that brings to Mekabei Sincha Yisrael 960, which is also the geula, the redemption of Klal Yisrael, and the Eibishter will accept all our tefillos. Therefore, although all of Sukkot, all 7 days, correspond to the idea of humility, which is the gateway, the key, that God accepts our tefillos, this is most relevant on Hoshana Rabbah. Because Hoshana Rabbah, every day comes another guest, an Ushpiz. Who is the Ushpiz of Hoshana Rabbah? David HaMelech, according to all opinions, right? David HaMelech is the paradigm of Tefillah. He says, Va'ani Tefillah, the shtickle ha'chefta from Tefillah. And David HaMelech, throughout Tehillim, is the symbol of humility. Therefore, everyone knows how many species do we take, how many shtiklach do we take in the Daled Minim? There's 1 lulav, 1 esrog, 3 hadassim, and 2 aravas. What do you got together? Who's a mathematician here? 7. And you start from the top. So the Hoshana Rabbah corresponds to which species? Hello, Earth calling Holy Law. Anyone not brain dead? Please raise your hand. No? Anyone out there? Aravas. Therefore, tomorrow you're going to take a bundle of 5 aravas. Hello? And you're going to clap them. We have the expression in Yiddish, an ois geklappte Hoshana. Right? So interessant, the Medrash says on the pasuk for Lakachtum Lechem B'Yom HaRishon, taking the 4 species, Hado D'chsiv, this is related to a pasuk in Tehillim in chapter 102, Pono el Tefila Sa'ar V'Leiboza Tefilosam, God turns to the prayers of the broken, desolate, crushed person. He doesn't despise their prayers. When people come, there's different types of tefillah. Tefillah Moshe, tefillah David, tefillah La'oni. The most important, the most vital prayer is the tefillah of the poor man, which represents David HaMelech, whose malchus, the leis migar meklum. He has nothing of himself. Total self-effacement before God. And therefore, says the Holy Sfas Emes in Tafresh Mem Hey, it says, Pona el tefila sa'ar, God turns first and foremost to the prayer of the humble person, which is the arova. Everyone knows the esrog has a smell, has a taste without a smell. Esrog has both. The lulav has a taste without a smell. The hadassim have a smell without a taste. So they represent Torah and deeds, good deeds. The arova has no taste and no smell. It's garnished, the nobody in life. 0. Right? The lowest of low. Who does God turn to? Ponna el tfilas arer, v'loy boza es tfilosam. He doesn't despise the tfilas of the plural. Doesn't tfilosoi, tfilosam. That even the esrog and the lulav and the hadas type of Jews, their prayers are heard in the schus of, in the merit of the arova. Because that is the prerequisite for all prayers to be heard. And therefore, the arava represents which part of the body? I said it before. Your lips. Your lips, says the Zohar, refers to prayer. Therefore, Hoshana Rabbah becomes the day of prayer. I know my shver is all gesundheit. He's all Lubavitcher, but every year on Hoshana Rabbah, he used to go to Borough Park to the Bluzhev Rebbe. And Bluzhev, I don't know what happened in the transmission over the sea somewhere in England, but you go to like Tzadikim, Hoshana Rabbah is like the biggest prayer of the year. I heard from the Kloisenberger Rebbe, the Shefa Chaim, Tzadikim had more tears in their prayers on Hoshana Rabbah than they did on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. In Bluzhev, they blow shofar between each one of the 7 akofis. The Rebbe gives the drasha, Divrius Chaskus, words of. It's like I used to finish like 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon. I know by the previous Belzer Rebbe, of Aaron Belzer, the Kodesh El Mamash HaMelech, one year Hoshana Rabbah fell out on a Friday. Shmini Atzeres was Shabbos, Simchas Torah was Sunday, and they had to warn everyone when you clap the Hoshanos, It was the whole day they were davening, from early in the morning. And already Shabbos was coming in, it was like already time for lich benching. They told him, when you clap the Hoshana, do so very softly, it shouldn't be a shayla of Chil Shabbos. The whole day they were in shul, in this medrash. Right? Hours and hours and hours. The davening by tzaddikim, bichlal, I said on Shabbos, I mentioned the Munkach brings in Shal Yisoscher. He had a Kabbalah from his fathers, his ancestors, all holy Jews, Ish mipi Ish from the Choyze, who heard B'Shem Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, who heard from Eliyahu Hanovi Zocher Latov, that if a person davens Erlich on the 3 days of Hoshana Rabbah, Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, you'll be able to daven Erlich all of the whole year. And it's alluded to, it's brought in Sfarim HaKadoshim, that Shmini Atzeres, the Gemara says, is a regel bifnei atzmai, is a separate yontif regarding, sometimes it's considered the 8th day of Sukkot. Regarding other halachas, it's a separate independent yontif regarding Pazer Kashav, which is an acronym which I'm not going to discuss now. But the Tzadikim Taich, those tefillas which are nispazer, the tefillas which don't ascend to heaven, and they're just spread out, hanging around, they didn't ascend before the Kisei HaKovid, Pazer Kashav, the Eibishter listens to them over Hoshana Rabbah, Shmini Atzeres, and Simchas Torah. And by Sfarim HaKadoshim was brought in the Kabbalah from the Tfer Shmuel, from Alexander, brings the name of Reshel Rinover, that the tefillas of Hoshana Rabbah are certainly equal to Yom Kippur, and perhaps even more so. People are not aware of this. How do you know? Could Yom Kippur fall out on Shabbos? Yeah. Could the first day, could the Raisa, taking a little of an Esrog, fall out on Shabbos? Yeah. In other words, we push aside the inyanim of the day. Rosh Hashanah could fall out on Shabbos. Yeah. And what happens? You don't blow shofar, you don't do this, you don't have Yidam Malkeinu on Yom Kippur, and you don't take a little of an Esrog if it's Sukkos. Hello? When they fixed the calendar, the only day they made sure can never, ever, ever fall out on Shabbos is the Hoshana Rabbah. Is the Charaya that the Hoshana Rabbah is so vital and so important, right? That under no circumstances could we allow Hoshana Rabbah to fall out on Shabbos where you won't be able to do what you have to do in Hoshana Rabbah. And this all, I sort of vort from the Shaila Moira, the Krenitz Rover, Avram Fried's his grandfather. Moira the Gevort. Hoshana, which is our cry for help. Hey, Vav, Shin, Ayin, Nun, Aleph. Write out the letters. You get the numerical value of 729, which is Krasotn. We rip up the Satan and all of his tachbulas. In other words, even Sfarim HaKadoshim say, even those prayers that are not heard in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we didn't merit. Hoshana Rabbah, you could. Hoshana Rabbah is called the Mesiras, the Kvittel. On Rosh Hashanah, your judgment is written, or perhaps it's postponed to Yom Kippur if you're Beinani, right? Yom Kippur, it's decided, but you still have the ability to change, to rip it up, until it's actually delivered. When is the delivery date? Hoshana Rabbah. So Hoshana Rabbah, Hoshana, is Gematria Krasot. Where do you know the words Krasot? Anybody? What? If you have it, my dear cousin, sir, on the back of your mezuzah is puzzle, change it immediately. Ana b'chayach. Remember that prayer we say sometime before the Chadaydi or in the morning if you use the Jewish prayer book? Hello? Ana b'chayach. Yeah? There are 7 lines, and next to it there's an acrostic of, right? The second line is Kabel Rinas Amcha. Kabel Rinas Amcha. May you hear the prayers of your nation. Sagvenu, strengthen us. Tareinu, purify us. Neira, the awesome one. Those letters, Rosh Tevis, are Krasot. That's the name that we rip up anything negative. So Hoshana, which you cry out tomorrow with a loud voice, right, is Krasot. So what is Krasot? Amongst 100 billion other things, spend the whole night talking about Krasot. But the Sefer famously says, if you take the 2 names of the 3rd patriarch, Yaakov, who corresponds to Sukkot generally, hello? Yaakov plus, what's his other name? Alias? Yisrael, it's 729 Krasot. What does that teach me? What do I learn from this? Now, you remember, when was Jacob's name changed? when he fought with the angel of Esau, the Samach Mem, this epic struggle, this battle, cosmic battle. So the Satan says, from now on, you're not going to be called Jacob, you're going to be called Yisrael. And the Jewish people of Israel. Then God himself appears to Jacob in a nocturnal vision, and he says, Shimcha Yaakov, your name is Yaakov. You won't be called only Yaakov, you'll be called Yisrael. It's interesting, when the Satan spoke to Yaakov, he says, your name is only Yisrael, no longer Jacob. God says, Shimcha Yaakov, you're called Yaakov. But nonetheless, we're going to add a name. As the Gemara says in Brachos Daf Yud Beis, Yisrael will be your main name, and you'll also, however, Tafel, you'll be called Yaakov. What does that mean? Yisrael is perfection. Yisrael is Kisorisa, you victor with man and angels. Yaakov is the struggling Jew. The Jew is imperfect, incomplete. When do the Jews victor? When do you rip up the Satan? Not when you're B'chinas Yisrael. Like, if you're a Yisrael type of fellow, on Rosh Hoshana itself, immediately God decreed you can have a wonderful, fantastic, great year. Most of us are not on that Madrega. We're on the Madrega of Yaakov. Dafki Yaakov, the one who struggles, plus Yisrael, then you come to Krasot. And that's why we say Daled Minim is connected to a nation that has been struggling. Right? We're dealing with struggling people. And I read the Lashon of the Medrash. This shall be written to the last generation, the end of time, our generation, the people at the end of the totem pole, the lowest of low. La'am nivra, to a nation that has been created. What does that mean? Yahalko says God, this refers to people who are on the way out. They're like they're dying, right? And God resurrects them and recreates them. Let's look at our generation. Spiritually, we're a nation that, unbelievably, compared to ancestors, compared to previous generations, how lowly we are. Nonetheless, the Eibishter gets nachas not from our successes, but from our struggles, that we try. And therefore, the Eibishter resurrects us. In fact, all of tshuva, as we discussed a few shiurim ago, is a concept of resurrection of the dead. Right? In fact, this whole process of Tchias HaMeisim starts with Rosh Hoshana. We blow the shofar. What do we say in the blessing by shofars on Rosh Hoshana? Ki ata, where's our chazan? Oh. Ki ata shemeya kol trua. Umazin, gata shemeya kol shofar. Umazin trua. Next words. Ve'ein doimeloch. And there's no one like you, God. Where else in the davening, in the liturgy, do you have the words ve'ein doimeloch? What? Mechalkel Chaim, ve'ein doimeloch. Where else? In Akol Yeducha on Shabbos. Ve'ein doimeloch ha'mashienu. When? What is the second bracha of Shemini Esrei? Baruch Hashem Chayim Eitim. Whenever we deal with the resurrection of the dead, ve'ein doimeloch. We say shofar is the wake-up call to resurrect us. Right? Tchias HaMeisim. So we say the Daled Minim is all four types of Jews, the holy Jews, the sublime Jews, sacred people, other kinds of compromised people, until you come to the Arova. The Arova is the lowest of the low. And yet, in the schus of the Arova, who's crying his heart out to God, I want to be close to the Eibishter, that's all our tefillah. And by the way, who was the one who personifies Tchias HaMeisim? Who was the Ushpiz of all the Ushpizim who never died? David HaMelech. Hence, the 3 meals on Shabbos correspond to Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov. It could be a genius, 3 meals. Which is the meal of David HaMelech? Amal v'malchus is connected to Tchias HaMeisim. What you eat is Etz HaMeluz, from which that part of the body will be Tchias HaMeisim, right? And therefore, I'm not going, without getting involved in it, we say Mechayim Meisim Berachmim Rabim, which is Gematria Shvorim. A dafka, a broken heart, through humility, God resurrects us and gives us all that we need. Just to end off with the story, I just remind every year I tell the story, and because I remember living through it. There was a the Rav of Kfar Chabad. His name was Reb Nachum Trebnik. I knew him very well. And he would come every year to the Rebbe for Tishrei, and he would always spend one day in the Lower East Side in the company of Rav Moshe Feinstein, who was like the Poisik of the generation, and they were childhood friends from White Russia like hundreds of years before. And when he came from Eretz Yisrael, he would always spend the day by Rav Moshe. One day, the only time Rav Moshe's schedule one year was very packed, the only day he could be with him was Hoshana Raba. So Rav Nachum spent the whole morning, early afternoon by Rav Moshe. Then he was going back to Crown Heights for Shmini Atzeres. So Rav Moshe Feinstein asked Rav Nachum Trebnik, when you're going back, you're going to the Rebbe, please tell him the name of my relation, tell him his name, his mother's name, that the Rebbe should be mispalel because he's critically ill, very, very sick. So he knew that the Rebbe gives out lekach, like honey cake, Erev Yom Kippur. For those who weren't there Erev Yom Kippur, he'd give it out Hoshana Raba. Hoshana Raba is like the makeup of Yom Kippur. So he asked Rav Nachum to go past the Rebbe and get lekach and tell him this message from him, which he did. And the Rebbe said they should go and clap shyness with this guy, with this sick person. You know, the 5 times that you beat the Aravis, which is the 5 Gevuras. Right? Anyway, the Rebbe was the old man. He was in his 80s and whatever. Yeah, to schlep back to Manhattan. He's a foreigner, an Israeli. He sent a group of Bachrim. The Bachrim took a taxi. They went to Mount Sinai Hospital, right? And they come to the ward where Moshe Feinstein's relative is in bed. He's sleeping. They ask the nurse, they say he's in a coma. Like, what do you do now? But Chassidim are all crazy, you know, they just have blind faith. The Rebbe hastened clapping a shyness. They asked the nurse, could we put the Aravis in his hand? Could you imagine the scene of clapping a willow, like in an ICU somewhere? The guy, it sounds so bizarre. I'm not trying to be nice and whatever. I'm not really against Jews. So my best friends are Jewish, but it's like really bizarre. If you're a goyish nurse, you're watching the scene. Gesundheit, hey, do what you want. Like this guy is like finished. They put the Aravis in his hand. They clap 5 times. Suffice to say, the next day, this guy was down in the shul in Mount Sinai Hospital for Shmini Atzeres in Chosdeira. The moral of the story is, I'm trying to impress upon you, the koyach of tefillas, of aravis, of whatever, of Hoshana Raba, then Shmini Atzeres in Chosdeira. Once you have davni, and davni b'techliv nishper v'nitke, a broken heart, a contrite heart, you reach that the Eibusher should bless us all with the ksiv l'chim, l'toiv l'shana toiv l'mezuka, l'toiv ha'nir v'negel.